The Resourceful Homestead will use items that they already have. Today's episode, a peasant bread or a basic sourdough bread, and overproofing. So we have some nice bubbling on the top. It is active. You can hear it if you listen. Okay, our starter is floating a little bit, so we're going to assume that it is ready. Never pour your starter down your sinks. We need to feed this. We'll do that in a little bit. One and 1/3 cups of warm water. Mine is about 110 degrees. And we're going to pour this starter into that. So I'm just going to give this a good stir, get that activated. Sourdough discard has mixed with the water. Incorporate some of this flour into my starter. So I'm using a Dutch whisk. You really don't need a lot of equipment to make bread. I know a lot of people are going for the bantons and all this fancy stuff that they say you need to make bread. They're using their mixers, and I like to do bread baking from scratch, and I like to do it by hand. There's something about the magic that happens inside this bowl with this sourdough starter. And I'm going to pull that out. We're going to mix the rest of the flour in by hand. And I will pull a little more flour if I feel like I need it. Start with 3 cups of flour, and if you need more, you can add the extra half cup. And if you feel like you need even more, because this is sticky, I'm going to add a little more flour to my bowl here, a little at a time. Okay, get all this excess off my hands. I think I've got it to where I can work it. And for this part, we are going to combine it, and we're going to allow it to rest for 30 minutes. We're going to cover it and let it rest. So I always like to get mine in a ball in the center of the bowl. And I'm going to place a towel over this and allow it to rest for 30 minutes. We'll be back. While we're waiting on that, I need to feed my starter. I need 1/2 cup of water. And you can always transfer this to a clean jar. I'm going to leave it in this jar, and maybe the next time around I'll change out the jar. Just going to scrape down some of that on the sides, and we're going to add in our flour. And I'm going with 1/2 cup of water and about 2/3 to 3/4 cup of flour, because I want a thick starter. is where my starter is. We're going to get this covered, and I'll be feeding this if I need to feed it one more time. I'm going to set this in a warm spot, and we're going to allow this to sit overnight. Then this will go into the refrigerator, and I'll bring it out before I start another batch. All right, my bread has been resting for 30 minutes. Now it's time to stretch and fold this dough. It should bounce back a little bit, and it's doing that. I'm going to get a little bit of flour on my counter. Good flop. So you're building your gluten up by doing these steps. And I'm just going to be folding and stretching my dough. So each time I lift and fold, it is going to increase the gluten in my dough. And I'm going to do this a total of 4 times. So 30 minutes of rest between each time. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to stretch and fold to really build that gluten up in this bread dough. And back into the bowl. And cover and back into my oven. Now I use my oven. My house is kind of on the cold side, so what I have in the bottom of my oven is I've warmed some water up on top of my stove, and I've turned my light on. So that's helping that rise to take place, since my temperature in my house is around 66 degrees. It's starting to hold its shape, which means the gluten is starting to really build up in the dough. We're going to do one more stretch and fold and let it rest for another 30 minutes before we shape our dough and allow it to sit for 8 to 12 hours. So now it doesn't need as much flour. It's still sticky a little bit, but it's pliable. And we can do the window pane test. And we're getting a nice window pane there without it tearing. You can get rough with your dough now and really work it in and build up a little bit more of that gluten. I'm going to squeeze together my seam on the bottom. We're going to do one more head and shoulders, knees and toes fold, and then we're going to finish it out. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. We're going to roll this up. Again, I'm going to shape it. I'm going to check that seam on the bottom. I don't even see a seam. Back into our bowl, and this time I'm covering it with some plastic wrap, and we're going to allow this to sit 8 to 12 hours or longer until it is doubled in size. And if I run out of time tonight, it'll go into the refrigerator, and then tomorrow morning I'll pull it out, let it sit for about 3 hours for it to come to room temperature, and then we'll do we'll put it in our final loaf and get ready to bake it. So that is the plan, and there it is. It's day 2. My dough sat in the refrigerator overnight, and it has continued to proof. I'm going to go to the final step before we bake, and that is to get it into a banten or into a bowl and I'm using a bowl with parchment paper, and then we're going to use a cast iron Dutch oven to bake our bread in. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to preheat my oven. I think originally I told you 500 degrees. I think I'm going to go with the 500. And the reason I'm doing this is I've got to get this cast iron Dutch oven heated up, and I have got fat inside of this so that it will help the bread to release. I've pulled a straight edge razor blade. Well, this is a double-edged razor blade. I've got my bowl over here where you can't see it, already lined with my parchment, and we're just gonna check this out. It's got a little bubbling on the top. It's a good stiff dough, and it will be a stiff bread. Alrighty. Get it loosened from the bowl. And it may have overproofed a little bit from the looks of it, because it was so late when it was ready for me to start the final process. I threw it into the refrigerator to preserve it, but it continues to proof even in your refrigerator. So just going to add a little bit of flour to this so that I can work this dough out. And at this point, we're basically going to do our folds. And it's head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and then we're going to roll it. And we're going to get it into the shape that we're wanting it into. I'm going to go in here and pinch this bottom May have to do this a couple of times to get the volume that I'm looking for. So head, shoulders, knees, toes, and roll. So this dough is absolutely sucking up all of that excess flour that I just put on it. Okay. Don't really need to do much pinching on it. And into my bowl for the final proof. Well, let's open up the pot and see what we have. And apparently I didn't score my lines deep enough, but and we're going to put this back in the oven for another 18 to 25 minutes, and hopefully we will have a really nice bread. All right, it is out of the oven. It did not open up like I was hoping. I do know that it was overproofed, and I do have a little bit of a design on the top. We're going to use some butter. Hopefully this butter softened up enough for me to spread. And we're going to let this sit on my counter for an hour. I don't know what it's going to look like inside because it did overproof. Doesn't mean it's a bad bread. It just means it overproofed. This is a basic sourdough bread, or you can call it a peasant bread, because it has limited ingredients. I'm going to get that butter up there and let that melt into that crack. But that looks wonderful to me otherwise. Hold it up for the camera. You can see a little bit of my decorations there. I'm going to flip this over. And we're going to do the underside too. It is going to be a very crusty bread. So the butter will kind of soften that crust up a little bit. All right, flip it back over. That's the crust. And there's our bread. Our internal temperature is 202 degrees. Most of us have a serrated knife like this, and a few of us have a bread knife. So I'm going to cut this in half. We're going to take a look at the crumb. That bottom is just a little tough. We got it. So it looks a little doughy inside. So I know I overproofed this bread. Unfortunately, it's a little doughy inside. But I'm going to work on this, and maybe the next time I bring it to you, we'll get it right. It was overproofed. You can tell by these large holes in our final bread product. It's still edible though. Mm. It's overproofed. It's a little doughy inside. Can I salvage this? Absolutely. I can make bread pudding with this loaf of bread. Or I can cut it up and make breadcrumbs or croutons with it and salvage that bread. But it has a wonderful taste and flavor. Mm. It's so, so good. I hope you will try the recipe. Well, I hope you are enjoying this interactive video, which means that in the description box below, you will find the recipes. You will find the timestamps and tips, tricks, and troubleshooting your homemade sourdough bread. Be blessed and a blessing. Here's some content I think you might like. Thank you for visiting our homestead. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, hype, and share to help our small channel grow. See you next time for more simple living, frugal tips, and farmyard fun.